Hello students, today's video lecture is on the major muscles, and this will be just an overview lecture. We're going to identify some of the major superficial skeletal muscles and some of their actions. Okay, you can see that I have set the worksheet up to show an anterior or front view and then a posterior or back view. So there will be some overlap between the front and the back depending on where the muscle is. And I will explain to you some of why the muscle is called what it is and show you in the anatomy app its location and action. Okay, so this first muscle, we're going to go in alphabetical order as we see here, is called the sternocleidomastoid. That is a monster of a name. So really quick, it's named for the fact that it attaches to the sternum, down here, remember the chest bone, the clavicle, which is our collarbone, and so that's here and here. And then also it comes up behind the ear and attaches to a part of the skull called the mastoid process. So it's actually named for its two origins and one insertion. So let's go ahead and color in the sternocleidomastoid. And let's take a look at it on the anatomy app. Now, in order to view the sternocleidomastoid, I actually have to delete one of the other muscles that we learned last section in the facial muscles. So I'm going to delete this muscle here. I've also hidden the nervous system, so it does give you a pretty empty stare. Haha. So anyway, here is the sternocleidomastoid. I've deleted the platysma, which is right here. And underneath it is the sternocleidomastoid. So we could see it a little better here. We can see the origin on the sternum, origin on the clavicle, and if I turn, the insertions here on the mastoid process. So this is going to have a pulling effect in this direction, and it's going to cause the head to tip forward. That's if we use both sides at the same time. If we use the left side and the right side at the same time, it's going to cause the head to tip forward. However, we can just use one side at a time, and that will cause the head to tip to the side, or even to rotate. We'll pull this back position around to the front and cause left-right rotation. So this is a pretty important muscle of the neck because it causes you to be able to move your head in 3 of the 4 major ways. So overall, we have an arrow. If we draw our arrow in, I'm not going to be able to put all the I's and O's in on our diagram, but let's go ahead and put our arrow in to represent. Okay, on to letter B. Letter B is one of the most notable muscles of the entire body. Everybody's familiar with what we call the pec, and it's this muscle here on the front of the chest. Notice its grain runs almost like a medial lateral direction. And so if we put in our arrow, the arrow goes this way. This is actually a humerus mover. So it's going to move your arm. And it's known as the pectoralis major. So you can see here, it runs from the sternum over to the humerus. And the reason why it's called pectoralis major is if I delete this muscle, you'll see another muscle that's smaller underneath that's also in the pectoral or chest region. That's called pectoralis minor. So when you see minor, it means it's smaller. When you see major, it means there's something similar that's larger. So let's look at the app and see how it will move the arm. Here's pec major right here, pectoralis major, and you can see a little bit better. It comes all the way over to the humerus bone, and it allows us to pull our arm forward along with some other muscles. This section right here is pulling in an upward direction towards the clavicle. So we see that again, how the muscle shortens to pull the arm forward. And then also shortens to pull the arm in. This one's really obvious, I think. So the muscle stretches when we abduct and contracts when we adduct. So we see that arrow that goes inwards, that's shoulder adduction, and then we also have an upward arrow as it helps us lift our arm to the front. And that's letter B. Letter C is right next door. And notice the grain of letter C is mimicking that of this piece of pectoralis major. And so it shouldn't be surprising to you that our arrow is also upwards on this muscle here of the shoulder. These two work together in that function. Letter C is called the deltoid. Now, the deltoid, we can see it from the front. Watch here. There's a front portion, there's a side portion, and there's a back portion. And each one of those portions of the muscle is going to pull with an upward direction. So no matter which way we look at it, we'll always have this up arrow. But remember, this joint right here is a ball and socket. And so whenever we have a pull in an upward motion, it's going to lift the arm in various directions. Let's take a look at the actions. Here's flexion again, and we can see the deltoid is active. The front part of the deltoid is active in flexion. The middle part of the deltoid is active in abduction. That's lifting the arm straight out to the side. And the posterior portion is active in shoulder extension. That's lifting your arm to the back. So notice how the muscle will shorten and have an upward pull here. So we have flexion for one part, abduction for a second part, and extension for the third part, and that's all of the shoulder. It's almost like the deltoid acts like three different muscles, because normally we wouldn't have the same muscle doing two opposite motions, flexion and extension, but because they're like literally on different sides of the arm, this is what we get. Muscle D right next door. I think you're probably familiar with muscle D. This is one of the most commonly known muscles, but what you might not be familiar with is that it has a last name. So this is known as the biceps, and because it's in this upper arm region, we give it the last name brachii, because the brachial region is your upper arm. Biceps is named because it has two origins on its upper end, and its insertion is across the elbow onto the radius bone. And so if it's going to pull the radius bone up towards the shoulder, biceps is responsible for elbow flexion. And we can see that here in this animation. So there's flexion, and we watch as this muscle here. There's two parts to the biceps, two origins. See how it's changing up at the top? And as we watch, and the muscle will shorten in this direction. So we know it's doing the flexion motion. See how it's shortening in that position, in that motion? So it's the elbow flexion. Letter E, we're transitioning over to the abdomen. A fairly well-known muscle here, but most people don't call it by its real name. And when we color it, I'm going to leave these sort of white spaces in the center because this muscle has a very unique structure. It has little tendinous intersections. So most people will refer to this as a six-pack, but really if you count them up, it's 8. And this last one is very long. However, there is also a tendon, a thick tendon cord that runs down the center of the muscle, and it has the belly button at it. So this muscle here is known as the rectus abdominis. And the word rectus refers to the fact that the muscle grain is up and down with the long axis of the body. And as you may guess, the word abdominis refers to the fact that it is in the abdominal region. So straight up and down in the abdomen is what named this muscle. This muscle has a downward pull. So it's going to pull this area of the rib cage, xiphoid process area, down towards the pubis area, and that causes flexion of the vertebral column or crunching forward. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in the app. I do have to fade some of these other muscles because there's multiple muscles involved in this action, but you can see that muscle as this little wormy body looking guy pulls forward. That muscle is pulling in this direction and causing the entire torso to crunch forward. So from neutral to crunching forward. These muscles of the back would be stretching and getting longer at this point. And these would be shortening and contracting. So these muscles in the front cause flexion. Muscle F is on the side of the abdomen. And notice the grain of the muscle here is running at it's kind of a diagonal direction. So the muscle is named for that diagonal direction, and the word is oblique. There's multiple layers of these obliques. So we have an outer layer and an inner layer. And so for that reason, the outer layer is called the external obliques. As you may guess, the inner layer would be called the internal obliques, but they work together. So because our grain is diagonal, we're going to have a diagonal arrow. Now, one side of the obliques will actually do the opposite of the other side. And so hopefully you can understand how this will cause the torso or the vertebral column to rotate. Here in the app, we see the one side is pulling. This side here is pulling. Notice there's this line down the middle because you have one on the left side and one on the right side. So this side is pulling this way. If this person body were to turn the other way, it would be this side pulling this rib cage in. So one pulls one way and one pulls the other way. So they actually oppose each other. Okay, letter G, we're moving into the leg. Now these muscles are a little harder to understand because all we're getting is a little piece of them. But these muscles of the inner thigh area will mostly connect to the pubis bone and then come all the way down to the femur along the back side of the femur. And the name of this muscle group of the inner thigh actually gives you its action as well. The muscles are known as the adductor group. Now, each muscle of the adductor group has its own name, but we're learning them as a group. And what's your guess as to what the adductor group does? If you guessed that the adductor group does adduction, then you were right. So it's going to be instrumental in pulling this leg inward towards the midline. And so if we add our arrow, we end up having an upward arrow on this leg. It's going to cause this leg to be brought medially towards the midline. So let's look at our app. This gives us a better view. Let me stop it right there. If I back out, you can see that we're looking at a right leg and then like half of a pelvis with the sacrum here. So this is the adductor group. Now, when we add other muscles on top of this, we barely get to see. All this would be covered by other muscles. So this section here that we colored on our page is all we get to see. But in reality, there's a whole lot more going on underneath. So notice when the leg is far out like this, abducted, these muscles are stretched. And when we pull the leg towards the middle, they shorten and contract. So stretched, shorten and contract, causing adduction. Letter H on the front of the thigh is actually a group of 4 muscles, and watch carefully as I color. I'm going to bring this all the way down over top of the knee. I know that looks weird, but that's where the tendon ends up, so you can understand this a little more. This tendon for this particular muscle has the kneecap in it, and so I've colored that tendon all the way down. Muscle group H is known as the quadriceps group. The quadriceps group also has an up arrow associated with it, and it's going to draw the tibia forward. So let's watch in our app. As we get our bearings here, we're looking at kind of a side view of the knee. These muscles are stretched, and see how they shorten in upward direction, and it pulls that knee forward. So here, the quadriceps group of the leg is stretched. And when that muscle contracts, you can see it shortening. You can see it shortening here, short, 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 and it pulls the knee forward. So that's going to be extension of the knee. So you can write extension of the knee or knee extension. It means the same exact thing. Okay, the last muscle on our anterior view is down here on the front of the shin. And this is muscle I, and I'm going to color it very carefully. It gets thinner and thinner and turns just into tendon. It comes all the way over here. This muscle is named for its position, and because it covers the front of the tibia, it is called the tibialis anterior. Tibialis anterior. So again, with our arrow, remember the arrow is always running from I to O, so the insertion is down under the foot and the O is up here on the tibia. So if we draw an upward arrow on this, it's going to pull the whole foot at the ankle joint pull the whole foot up. Let's watch in our app. So it's a little hard to see. I have to zoom way out. But here's tibialis anterior. And notice as the muscle's shortening in this direction, put the foot down and we'll pull the full foot up. See how that's pulling upwards? It's kind of hard to see. This one's shortening. You watch really careful. Now when you point your toes down, it stretches, but when you pull your toes up, it's contracting. So it's pulling in an upward direction. And we have a special word for that movement at the ankle, known as dorsiflexion. Okay, so there you have it, the primary muscles of the front of the body.